Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Billy Currington, titled Summer Forever. But first, let's talk a little bit about the whole concept around the summer album. Because believe it or not, it seems to be a fairly new thing, along with the whole conceit of a song of the summer. I mean, sure, music critics who cover the pop charts, they mention this, but the concept of mass culture talking about it or marketing it can be traced to the internet, making the conversation a lot easier. And sure, there have always been lightweight, sunny summer albums pretty much forever, but the concept of an artist purposefully releasing a record of that material specifically timed to capitalize on that vibe, it's a little bit different, a little bit newer. And as a critic, they're surprisingly difficult albums to talk about. I mean, on the one hand, the content tends to be pretty lightweight, which means reviewing them doesn't tend to require a lot of digging and analysis. But on the other hand, evaluating the record becomes kind of trickier because the purpose of these albums is to be lightweight, ephemeral, and fun in the broadest way possible. They're designed to be enjoyed for a season over pool parties and barbecues and Bud Light. And you can bet by the end of the year, most people will have forgotten these songs ever existed, let alone the album. So on some level, evaluating what's considered good summer music is the stuff that persists beyond just one season. And that can be kind of hard to pinpoint if you're covering the record before the summer season has really kicked into the gear, like sort of what I'm doing right now. As such, I had a certain amount of pause before covering the newest album from Billy Currington, a country star that I've liked but never quite loved. He broke in the mid-2000s around the same time I was getting out of country music, but started consistently racking up #1 hits on the country charts thanks to his hangdog, generally affable delivery, and for recruiting songwriters that could consistently pump out some pretty solid songs. And yet in 2013, he jettisoned the few writings he had for the album We Are Tonight, a pivot towards bro country that was actually pretty good, but wasn't anything I was really interested in revisiting either. It was lightweight, inoffensive, and had just enough personality to stand out from the pack. In other words, if it hadn't been dropped in mid-September, it'd be the perfect summer album, the sort of smash hit that bro country often seems weaponized in order to create. And with all that in mind, and with the addition of one writing credit from Billy Currington himself, I figured it might not be bad for me to check out Summer Forever, which Buzz was suggesting was even more in that summer lightweight vibe. Hell, it could almost be pretty fun, right? Well, here's the thing. I give Billy Currington a lot of credit for taking songs that were at least a little bit outside the typical bro country template and explored it with a little bit more variety on his last album, We Are Tonight. But this album, Summer Forever, doesn't really do that. In other words, I could swap out the majority of the songs on this album with any other hookup, lightweight, focused bro country album, and little would sound all that different. The big redeeming factor is where acts have embraced more rough-edged electronic or rock elements in order to add some real muscle to their albums. Looking at you, Luke Bryan. Currington instead focuses on making the songs as breezy and easy as possible. And I'd argue that's the kind of right choice of this sort of subject matter. So yeah, as an album, it's definitely easy to digest and overall, mostly enjoyable. But if you forgot this record existed in a month or two, I wouldn't be all that surprised. So okay, let's start with the biggest advantage that this record has going for it. Billy Currington himself. He doesn't quite have the infectious charisma of a Jake Owen or the killer vocals of a Randy Houser or Chris Young. The best way I would describe his drawl and inflection is very approachable. He's got energy and he's got real sincerity, and without a huge amount of grit, he comes across as having a sort of ragged charm that does work for him. The odd thing is that his tenor can be a bit of an odd fit for the thicker electric guitars that come in on tracks like, say, Wake Me Up. But in taking a trick from recent Dierks Bentley or Brad Paisley albums, he fuses that lightweight electronic elements that do crop up with tones in the guitars and the steel guitars that flow well enough to keep the breezy vibe going. It helps that most of this album, he falls into the Eric Postley's mold of more sensitive, adult contemporary country music. Whereas sincerity and greater age, he's over 40 in comparison with most bro country acts, he gives him a very comfortable maturity that he can walk in a very easy lane. Except when he tries to pick up on more of a rapping cadence, which is just flat out embarrassing. The best cases arguably are Jonesin and Nowhere Town, if only because they had a little bit more of a melodic focus. You could call them legit country songs. But the absolute worst track on this record is the country rap track Soundtrack. Well, it's because Currington, he just sounds out of place and honestly a little bit embarrassed trying to structure a flow, especially on that bridge. It doesn't work for him at all. But fortunately, it helps that most of his instrumentation and production plays into this very lightweight, mid-tempo vibe. Yeah, I'm still not the biggest fan of drum machines or clapping beats or occasional synthesizers that do flutter through the mix, but the usage of some smoother guitar tones, hints of steel guitar, even a little bit of organ and piano does a lot to keep the melody closer to the forefront on some of the better songs, with just enough gentle acoustic guitar and banjo to add some real country texture. These are very approachable tracks. Take Donut, the lead-off single that's anchored by that 4-note melodic hook that repeats itself across acoustic and electric guitars and proves pretty damn infectious, and helped by some of the thicker, punchier drums that actually sound pretty good, even though the song is kind of dumb as sand. A similar formula works even better in the slow burn of Good Night, with Jesse James's coos adding even more, or on the gentle melodic flow of Do I Make You Want wanted with that spacey bridge with a damn perfect interweaving guitar melody. Probably my favorite song on the album, it's really good. Or in a different way on the rollicking groove of It Don't Hurt Like It Used To, thanks to those heavier drums and guitars that actually sound pretty good. Where this record stumbles, like with most bro country in this vein, is when the banjo or guitar tones get a little bit thicker against the very obvious and underweight drum machines, like on Give It To Me Straight. Not a bad song with the steel guitar, although the tone of that solo was a little fuzzier than it could have been, and Billy Currington trying to bring in a sexy spoken word bridge, it was abandoned as ridiculous barely a few bars in, and for good reason. And unfortunately, it was brought back for the title track at the very end of the album, which sounds like a clunky Luke Bryan import with overmixed percussion, obvious auto-tune, and a melancholy tone, which you'd think is the last thing you want for a song titled Summer Forever in this vein. The hilarious thing is that it probably has one of the more striking guitar solos and some pretty good organ behind it. Not a terrible track, but it definitely could have been better. Then we got Sweet Love, which feels like Billy Currington hopping on one of Zac Brown Band's more acoustic beach-inspired love songs. It was sure, it's not bad, but the backing vocals on this album are nowhere near as impressive and deep, and they don't quite give him the swell he needs to really pull it off. But then again, of course, the worst track on this album by a mile is Soundtrack, which sounds all kinds of overmixed and clumsy with the overblown twang, the squealing organ, the hand clap percussion, those weedy whistles against obviously synthetic drums, and a guitar line that's struggling to get more presence. Not a bad guitar lick either, but with the rest of the song, doesn't work. But now we really need to talk about the lyrics. And if we're looking for an area where this album feels very lightweight to me, it would be here. Now don't get me wrong, they're seldom egregiously bad, but they are pretty thin and forgettable. Doing It, Wake Me Up, Good Night, Do I Make You Wanna, they're pretty straightforward hookup tracks we've all heard before, with Jones and falling more towards nervous anticipation and Sweet Love being the attempt to set things right after things went wrong. And again, it's rare these songs are outright bad. Good Night and Do I Make You Wanna are both damn solid songs, but they're sort of lacking in distinguishing details to tell stories or stand out. The couple references that Currington does make are towards karaoke, and of course that works for me, but it doesn't add much. And when we do get more details, it doesn't always pay off the way you would expect. I was hoping that Drink in Town with a football problem might have gone into some of the warped psychology that surrounds sports in the United States in a small town, in a Friday Night Lights sort of fame, but instead we get glorification of all of it that borders a little on pandering. Give It To Me Straight, it's a bit of a weird song. It shows Currington interrogating his lover about possibly cheating on him. It could easily come across as a lot darker than it is, but he doesn't bring any sort of intimidating presence, and I guess it's supposed to ring as mature that he's not mad, but the resignation lands in an odd place. You would expect him to be mad if she cheats, at least for me. What hits a lot better is It Don't Hurt Like It Used To, which has a lot of optimistic energy for finally being over an ex who treated him badly. And yeah, honestly, it could have been handled with a little bit more class, but there's a place for a song like this. I'll ultimately forgive it. But then there's Soundtrack and the title track, both bro country songs that are pretty damn shameless, especially Soundtrack, as Billy Currington embarrasses himself asking girls to shake their ass to his soundtrack. Dude, you're over 40, you're better than this, you don't need to make crap like this. But okay, on some level, you have to wonder if he really is better than this, because I gotta be honest, I struggled a lot with Summer Forever. On the one hand, it's inoffensive, but in a way that it's got its own problem, because the storytelling just isn't there in the same way as it was in the past. You can give these songs to a half dozen different artists and little would really change all that much. And even evaluating it as very much of a summer album, it feels a little bit awkward, with songs that are outright endorsing staying in or playing things low key. And the lack of real drama or even the lack of a real party vibe means that it's kind of hard for me to get sucked in or excited about this album. For me, I'm thinking it's a light 6 out of 10 and a recommendation if you're looking for something lightweight and kind of sweet, more background music than anything. But otherwise, it's not as distinctive or creative as his previous albums, and that does disappoint me. If you're curious, worth a listen, but as I said, don't be surprised if you forget it a day later. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums coming out that you want me to take a look at, I'd be more than happy to give them a listen. Just give me time. My schedule is ram-packed as it is. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.